Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hi, I'm Rory, and with me, as always, is Ken. So how are you today, Ken?
Exceptionally well, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. This is episode 114. We have a spiffink, which is a word we use here in Warrington from time to time. A spiffink, meaning really good episode for you. Starting off with working with a hesitant client in the counselling room. So really good topic there. We're going to be then moving on to something that may even get your attention. Sex in the therapy room. And it's probably not what you think it is it, Rory?
No, we're talking figuratively, not literally. And I'm going to be talking about, working with clients who may be talking about the most intimate parts of their lives and how we have to consider that the world is very wide-ranging in that area and we need to be open-minded.
Looking forward to that. And of course, we're ending episode 114 speaking about the use of academic journals. So starting us off, working with hesitant clients. Can you kind of give us a description of what we might see in a hesitant client so we can recognize and kind of define what we mean there?
Well, it's interesting. In our Counselling Tutor Facebook group, where we have thousands of members, so if you want to know and you're not a member of our Counselling Tutor Facebook group, just type Counselling Tutor into Facebook. Remember, there's 2 L's in counselling. Type that in, and you'll find our group. It's a closed group, but if you knock on the door, we let you in, and there's thousands and thousands of students, qualified practitioners, there's some tutors in there, and also supervisors, all talking about the world of counselling and psychotherapy. On every Friday, I do something called a Counselling Tutor Takeaway, where I go live in the Facebook and answer questions that people may have, just talk about what's going on. And one of the questions that came up is, if you had a hesitant client who was disabled, how would you work with that? And what might come up? And one of the things, of course, if someone is a wheelchair user, they may be worried about practical things like getting to the room or using the toileting facilities. So sometimes when clients phone up and they're very hesitant, it might be at the first contact, I'm not sure, I'm disabled. It might be useful just to kind of gently explore what the issue is. And reassure them most organisations that offer counselling in placements should have facilities under the Equalities Act to support people with disabilities. But that's not the only kind of hesitancy we see, and that is sometimes people are just had a very bad experience the last time they've been in therapy, Ken.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to kind of define what we mean by hesitant. And hesitant is somebody who is maybe considering counselling, but they have a hesitation. They feel that there is a blockage. There's something that's maybe stopping them from engaging in therapy. And from my experience of being in private practice for some years, many clients can be hesitant, and they will think very clearly before becoming into counselling. They can be hesitant before even reaching out. There's a whole process that will go on before a client would even get in contact with the agency or with you as a private practitioner, the thought process that they may go through. I've heard countless clients share with me that they've been right there just about to phone that number and then thought, oh no, I can't go through with this, and they hesitated at that moment. And it's an incredibly big step. We need to remember that when our client is reaching out to us in the first place. If they're getting in contact, even to just find out what we do and explore what counselling is, they've gone through a whole process before that. And I think it's that we should be mindful of that in the way that we that first communication with our client looks. So if you're answering a phone, you're going about your general day, you're doing your stuff, and the phone rings and you just pick it up and a person is there. And it's about being mindful that they have already traveled a whole road before making that call, and there could be a lot of hesitation on their side. And I guess we're there to reassure them of what it is we do, to be clear, to outline it, to take away the fear, because of course the biggest fear and the biggest cause of hesitation is that fear of the unknown, as you used in that example, Rory. Will they have the right facilities? Will they be able to look after the needs that I have? It's that fear. I don't know something, therefore I hesitate.
Yes, and there's other more subtle things that sometimes come up. It may be some clients will ask you about what you have in the therapy room. I've known some practitioners who've been asked by clients, "Do you have mirrors?" And might say, "Well, we do. Is that a difficulty?" And they might say, "Yes." They may have a difficulty seeing themselves in the mirror. And I know therapists who will take their mirrors down and put them out of the way so the client doesn't have to see themselves. And also, just general artifacts that can be in a therapy room, things like candles that we might have if we're working from home, can be the cause of a lot of stress to clients who've been abused. It can trigger people. So, if you get a client who asks for specific things, make sure you accommodate them. It might sound, taking the mirrors down or removing certain things from the therapy room may sound an odd request initially, but in the context of trauma, it makes so much sense.
100%. And it's, again, meeting those clients where they're at and being mindful, maybe being in their frame of reference pre-session starting. And of course, as counselors, we work in a client's frame of reference to kind of understand it as they experiencing it. But do we look at it that the journey from their frame of reference prior to after the contracting? So somebody coming along, they may be hesitant. They may even have got that courage, keyed into that, made that call and be there at that first session. And that for them is dipping the toe in the water potentially. They're hesitating. Is this going to be a fit for me? Will this be right for me? And everything from the way your room is laid out to the way that they are greeted when they arrive, to the words that are shared during the contracting process are really, really important and to be considered from the point of view that somebody has made a massive decision. So often, not always, but so often, counselling for a person is kind of that last resort. It's when they go, you know what, I can't do this. I've tried really hard. I've tried other roads. I can't do this anymore. Very often they can say, I am a failure, I can't do it. I now have to reach out, and perceiving that from their point of view as kind of a weakness. I have to reach out to another human being for this. And counselling and psychotherapy is often portrayed that way in films and movies. What? You can't handle your emotions and you have to go to a counsellor or a therapist, whereas of course as therapists, as counsellors, psychotherapists, we know that it is in fact a strength when somebody reaches out. And I think that it's being able to paint that back to the person who sits in front of you, the person you speak to on the phone, the person you greet at the door. Let them feel that strongly. And I think you're 100% right, Rory. It's in everything. It's in the way we dress. It is in the way that our room looks. And if you look around your room, you were talking about candles, Rory. This again is a frame of reference. We may think as a counsellor, you know what, a candle is a lovely soft light. It gives the room a bit of an atmosphere. But candles can also be interpreted by some as a romantic gesture. Candlelight dinners. You've now got candles burning, scented candles. Could be an irritant to somebody who maybe struggles with their sinuses. We need to be so careful that everything that we have around us, every move we make, even tissues where they are placed within the counselling room. I have tissues in my counselling room, and I've been asked on more than one occasion by a client, "Oh, I see the tissues here. Are you expecting me to cry?" And it's about really considering that from the client's perspective.
Yes, absolutely. And hesitancy can also, you're absolutely right, Ken, and hesitancy can also be about exposure. So clients may come for one session, test the water out, and then they may go away. And 3 months later, they may phone you up and have another session and another session. And, for therapists, sometimes that can be sometimes frustrating. Why aren't they attending regularly? Well, all behaviour is goal-directed, as Carl Rogers said. And it may very well be that part of that is that they're hesitant. They could only do so much in one session and have to go away and process it and come back. And I've seen that in my own practice, and that's fine. That's fine. We work with the client. We meet the client where they are.
100%. And yes, I share that with you, Rory. I think it is commonplace. And it is. It's client directed. Specifically working person centered, it is entirely client directed at the client's pace. Of course, in contracted and boundaried agreements that are made in the beginning. But it is an interesting topic, and we've spoken very much about that first hesitation, the hesitation of going into therapy, that hesitation that might be there in that first session of how they feel, will I come back? But of course, this extends right into long-term therapy as well, where a client may have a presentation, a topic, something that they're bringing that they're hesitant to bring as well, and they can freely bring much of their material, much of their lives, but there may be elements that they are more hesitant to bring. And what we need here is to exercise patience. And what I mean by this, I'll give an example. You may work with a client in the very first session, and they, in that kind of just after contracting, when they're kind of giving the very broad outline of their story, they may kind of put something in that is significant to you as the counsellor. And I'm going to use in this example here, they may mention that they had been sexually abused in their overall presentation. But then that client may go on for session upon session upon session, for weeks, even for months, and sometimes even for years, to never touch on that they mentioned in the first session. They're hesitant to go there. They're fearful to go there. The trust needs to build. And of course, we as counsellors, we need to be patient, not to go stampeding there, trying to lead them there, thinking here's where the work needs to be done. We need to follow our clients and be patient. And Rory, there was one of Carl Rogers' students who speaks about a flower and patience, and I'm going to leave that to you because you know the quotes so much better than I do.
Yes, it was Rogers. It was one of Rogers' students who became an academic and a huge voice in the person-centered world, John Schilling, and he talks about going up. I think he mentioned it was September to see the poppies opening in the field near where he lived. And he said that, he could force the leaves open and see the beauty inside, but he damaged the poppy. And he sat and he patiently waited for them to open. And you're absolutely right. It is about patience, and hesitancy, as we've explored in this, can come in many forms. It can be about, some practical things. It can be emotional things. It can be situational things. And, if we have hesitant clients, the key skill, I think, is curiosity. Being kind, being empathic, but being curious just to explore it. And I guess one final thing is that your clients may have had mixed experiences of previous therapy. Sometimes clients come and say, my last therapy, it didn't work. And that can be a mixture of a mismatch between therapist and client not ready really to be in a therapeutic situation. They're not really in a position to share what's going on for them, so that can be quite difficult. And it's also sometimes, sadly, we meet therapists that just aren't very good, and clients pick up on that and then don't come back. So, yeah, there's lots here, isn't there, of working with hesitant clients, but patience, I think, is the key virtue here.
Like it. And that's what we do here on Counselling Tutor Podcast. We talk about the stuff that is less considered and sometimes that is not generally taught or discussed, including our next topic, which is an interesting one. This is Practice Matters. What is Practice Matters? Well, it's what happens in the practice room, because that's what matters, I guess. Look, it's all rhyming and going together, Rory. Oh, man, am I a poet today.
and you don't know it, Ken. Yeah.
So, sex in the therapy room. What can we expect from Practice Matters, Rory?
Well, it's really interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and my friend said, if I wrote a book, no one would buy it because they wouldn't believe it. And I think it keys in to a very kind of pressing subject. A lot of our clients will talk about their intimate relationships, their sex lives. And sometimes you may very well hear things that are quite new to you, shall I say. And I'm going to be exploring how we as practitioners work in a very adult way when people are talking about very intimate parts of the life, and maybe what we have to learn, what CPD we may have to do to fully meet our clients where they are.
That's Practice Matters after this very short message.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Sex in the therapy room. First and foremost, I want to give you a heads up. In this section, I do talk about sex and intimate relationships, and while there's nothing graphic or over descriptive, I do cover subjects with adult themes. Now, frankly, we need to talk about sex because our clients do. To be fully present with our clients, we need to be able to welcome all of them into the room, and that includes their sexual identities. So what are the common barriers that clients may face when discussing their sexual preferences? Well, the first is the therapist not understanding the client's sexual vocabulary. The sexual spectrum is very wide-ranging and can have its own particular vocabulary, which may cause confusion. If this happens, you can respectfully ask the client to clarify what they mean. However, clients tend to speak about their issues, not to teach the counsellor about their sexual preferences. So you may find yourself asking yourself the question, what training have you done in the areas of sexuality or sexual preferences? Sometimes training or just some CPD is really useful just to expand our knowledge of what really is an ever-expanding area. Therapist's own sexual experience can also be a bit of a barrier. A few years ago, one of my students asked me about a client's sexual practices, which is colloquially known as swinging. She was genuinely worried that the client was mentally unstable and she would never consider this type of activity herself. During the discussion, it became clear that my students had a very narrow view of other sexual preferences and found it highly embarrassing even to think of this practice. Now, the danger here lies in the therapist not knowing enough about the wide variety of experiences that people engage in and indeed becoming embarrassed. So ask yourself this question: how would you engage with a client whose sexual preferences may cause you to feel embarrassed? What may you have to do around that? And I would suggest personal reflection, supervision, and maybe just an exploration in your own personal therapy. One of the things that can come up a lot for clients is therapist prejudices. Through the years, I've come across therapists who have difficulty with certain elements of sexuality. Unbelievably, I've known therapists who've got difficulty with homosexuality and sexual practices such as sex work. This may lead to the client feeling that not all of their personality and who they are is welcome in the therapy room, as they're being judged. And I think you need to ask yourself this question: what types of legal sexual practices would give you the most difficulty? And if there are some, the answer may be worth exploring in supervision, personal therapy, and personal reflection. And I think it's worth mentioning this point. Just because we're accepting of other people's sexualities and their preferences doesn't mean we have to practice them ourselves. It's just making sure that we don't provide ourselves as a barrier, get in the client's way when they're talking about very intimate parts of their life. One of the other issues that can come up is therapist's voyeuristic curiosity. One of the reasons the book 50 Shades of Grey sold over 150 million copies was in part that it invited the reader to be a voyeur in the sexual relationship between the characters Christian Grey and Anastasia Steele. The book also brought to public awareness the sexual subculture of S&M, sometimes referred to as par exchange. And what I want to really acknowledge here is that some in the S&M community thought the book wasn't really representative of the scene in general, and certainly in the mantra that's used in S&M communities, which is things have to be safe, sane, and consensual. So again, ask yourself this client: if your client happens to be a real-life Christian Grey or Anastasia Steele, would you be a little curious to find out more? A therapist who becomes over-curious in a client's sexual practices may be in danger of living vicariously through the client's experiences, sometimes referred to as erotic countertransference. There's also something about working within our limits. While there's no expectation that counsellors will have an encyclopedic knowledge of sexual practices, it's useful to remember that the client can only go as far as the counsellor can go themselves. And in this case, if there's any barriers that are put in the way of the client may just stop talking about what's going on for them. So if for some reason you find yourself working to the limits of your competence or experience, it really is a principled position to make an ethical referral. Some clients whose presenting issues are primarily of a sexual nature may benefit from a counsellor who's specially trained in this area. And again, fair warning, I'm going to put some links into the handout to CPD opportunities that people can browse on the internet. They're all professional bodies. There's nothing illegal about them or devious about them. They are organisations that offer training and awareness raising in the area around sexuality and sexual preferences.
Thank you as always, Rory. Really, really interesting topic. And again, it's indication that the client can only go as far as we, the therapists, are able to go. And of course, Rory has created a super duper handout, and this one you're going to want to have it, Sex in the Therapy Room, and it's available free. All you need to do is go to our website, that is counsellingtutor.com. We're based in the UK, so the word counselling has 2 L's in it, counsellingtutor.com. Click on the podcast tab, you'll find that at the top of the page, and make your way to episode 114. That's today's episode. All of the show notes of everything we've spoken about today are on that page, so you can get a good summary, including any external links that may be relevant to the topics that we are discussing. And you can download Rory's super handout, Sex in the Therapy Room, from right within that page. All you do is you put in your email address and we will send it to your inbox for you. And of course, if you are already a member of our paid for resources, which is called the Counselling Study Resource, well, we've already put that handout in your handouts vault. Just log in, it is there and it is waiting for you. So we are ending episode 114 by speaking about the use of academic journals. So can you explain to me, Rory, what is an academic journal?
Well, yes. So we're all aware of Carl Rogers and the 6 necessary and sufficient conditions for therapeutic change. And that was published in the Journal of Consulting Psychology in the 1950s. It was 1956 or 1957 for publication. And an academic journal is where researchers and academics publish their research findings or the outline of their research findings. And in the world of counselling and psychotherapy, there's a huge amount of research being done all the time. The difficulty with academic journals is you have to pay for them. So if you're a member of the public, you type in a search, and you might have done this yourself. You type a search for something, and you find, I like that, and you click on it, and all of a sudden the website comes up and says academic journal. You get the first 5 lines, and then after that it says you have to pay. Now, if you're in a university, there are academic journals online. They subscribe to them, and Athens is a specialist website where they publish every academic journal on all courses. So if you have Athens at your university, you type it in, and then you just look at counselling and psychotherapy, and it drops down. But what do you do if you're curious and you're at an FE college maybe, or a private provider, and you want to find out a real detailed information about a topic that you're passionate about or researching? Well, the answer is actually no further than your local library, because you can access academic journals under something called the Access to Research initiative that the UK government put in a few years ago. And if you just Google in accesstoresearch.org.uk, we'll put that link into the show notes so that people can go to counsellingtutor.com when this is published, and you can just click on it and you can go from there. You'll find that you can actually access these things for free. So that's a really good tip. And certainly there are some things when you're researching that you might want deeper understanding of. So generally at level 4, you don't really need to access research journal articles. But if you're at university, or if you're just curious, if you're just thinking, I'd love to know more about that, you can access up-to-date research. And that's what academic journals do. I get lots dropping in my inbox all the time where people have researched something, and some of them can be really, really interesting, especially around modern ideas such as neuroscience. There's stuff coming out all the time.
They are. I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, we've done some podcasts in the past, and we've got some resources on our website, counsellingtutor.com, about the importance of research and how it kind of drives what we do forward, how it informs us as practitioners. And there is that ethical obligation that we do our continuing professional development. That's reading, learning, and being keeping up to date with what is happening. And academic journals are a great way to do that. I have to say, they can be quite heavy reading. They are generally written in pretty academic language, thus the name, academic journal.
Losing the name.
But it is pure gold that is in there, because you're looking at researched work. You're not looking at somebody's opinion, somebody's thoughts, somebody's ideas. You're looking at well-researched work. So you're getting the information pure and from the source. So long may they continue.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to consider is that a lot of people use textbooks, which is a great way of getting information. But, with great respect to anybody who writes a book, as soon as it's published, it is slowly, I guess, going out of date, because if it sits on the shelf for 4 or 5 years, then that's 4 or 5 years worth of information. Academic journals usually provide the most up-to-date information, so you can look at it and say, it's 2011, 2012, right up to literally the day it's published. So really, really useful. And I also think that if you've got a particular interest in a subject, I know as people come to the end of their level 4, people say, I'd like to do a bit more on child and adolescent therapy, or more on trauma, or I'm really interested in bereavement. Then, going to your local library and just having a quick look through the academic journals, you can find all sorts of interesting information. And here's the thing. If you start regularly looking at academic journals, when you go for any kind of a job or any kind of a placement, and you mention that you've been researching through journals, it gives the person who's interviewing you an impression that you're really serious. If you're spending your time in the library researching a certain topic around the placement or the job that you're getting, I think you'll find that people will take you seriously. And it's really interesting. If you go for a job at the college I used to work at, you will be asked, what research have you undertaken?
Yeah.
And that's happening a lot now in professional life. They want you to have the most up-to-date knowledge, and they'll ask that by saying, what research have you done?
And I believe so they should as well. And
Yeah.
it just fosters that best practice in service of our clients, because that's why we are here, and that's what that is all about. And you're 100% right. I mean, if you leave in college and you think, hey, I want to do a specialist area, go and do some in-depth research. And you may find in doing the in-depth research that that's not the area that you thought it was, and it's not the area of interest. Or you may go, yes, that is for me. But if you do that in-depth research, turn to those academic journals, which you can. And of course, Rory's already mentioned, if you want to link to that resource, which is, just tell us the resource name again, Rory.
It's called Access to Research. The clue's in the name. And all that will do really is tell you which library has the access to the portal. So they're usually the big towns, Manchester Library, if you go to London, or if you go to any major city centre, the libraries will be there. And it was a government initiative a few years ago to allow people to just, go into a library and get it. And of course, we forget, libraries were, when they were first promoted, I think it was in the 60s, were called a university on every street corner.
Yeah,
that's what they were called in the UK, a university on every street corner. So there you have it.
And of course, if you are one of our international listeners, I know we have so many outside of the United Kingdom, contact your local library and ask them. If they're not able to help you, contact your local university. They will be able to at least signpost you on that. And Rory, and kind of as you were talking about academic journals, you touched on textbooks and the importance of textbooks. And I think it would be amiss for me not to just point out that textbooks, they do indeed date as they go on, some more than others, specifically things related to ethics, the law. They will date pretty quickly as the law changes. Other things like theory, that will kind of be, the theory will remain the theory going forward. But that's why textbooks have edition 1, edition 2, edition 3. But if you want a fresh textbook, a book that you know has just come out where the information is as relevant as it can be, then you want to go and look out Counselling Theory in Practice. So that's Counselling Theory in Practice, a student guide by Rory Lees-Oakes. And I've got it in my hand. That's the noise of me flipping through this book. It is absolutely fantastic. You're looking at over 200 pages, packed with taking theory, putting it into easy to understand language and explaining how that is applied in practice. Pretty much what we do here on the Counselling Tutor Podcast, to be honest. And Rory wrote this book based on questions that have been asked over the years from students, from you, our listening audience. And if you want to get yourself a copy of that, it is available on Amazon right now. And if you want to know more details about that, then I suggest that you go and listen to our last podcast, episode 113, because I actually had the privilege of interviewing Rory and having a chat about the book in more depth. But there it is, Rory, episode 114.
Yeah, and what a great episode. We started off by working with hesitant clients, thinking about how to be curious, supportive, empathic with clients who may have some hesitancy. I talked about sex in the therapy room, who were misses, and then we moved on to the use of academic journals. And hey, as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take care.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.